Well, thank you for you joining us. We are here at the Season 1 Invitational in Roanoke, Virginia. Matthias Hunt and Ryan Overturf about to start our second set of quarterfinal matches. This is the 3 versus 6 match. It's Adrian Sullivan versus Daniel Fournier.
Sullivan, a perfect 8-0 record in Modern to this point, 4-0ing both legs, day 1 and day 2. On the play, by virtue of being the 3rd seed, that'll certainly come up here. Both decks are playing discard spells. You certainly want to be the one firing yours off first.
Yeah, and Adrian, so much style here in his deck choices and deck builds for this tournament, you'd expect nothing less. Lantern Control is his weapon in Modern. In Standard, played a Teamer control deck. It was basically a blue-red control deck with a creature plan of Tireless Trackers, Gnarlwood Dryads in the board, and even played Metallurgic Summoning.
And the way this deck won is just by stopping your opponent from playing Magic. Metallurgic Summoning was just a way to actually remove them from the game.
Yeah, but what style for doing it. We saw him win multiple games on the weekend with that. But it really was Lantern that carried him through this tournament. As you mentioned, the perfect 8-0 record, not even a draw with this deck, which that's pretty impressive.
Right. Winning 8 matches, impressive in itself. No draws with Lantern, another achievement.
Adrian will be on the play. So a lot of times with this Lantern deck, it's these early turns that are the most crucial.
I gotta say, it would take me a long time to figure out what a keepable hand looks like with this deck. You deal me 2 lands, some colorless, maybe some produce colored mana. You know, even give me a Blooming Marsh, make it easy. A Codex Shredder and a Lantern. I don't know if that's good.
Spire of Industry, Mox Opal for Adrian. And you're right, it's hard because there's so few cards that are, I guess, traditionally good in the deck. Mox Opal, however, that one is a clearly good card.
One of the more powerful cards in Modern.
Codex Shredder for Adrian. He can't use the Mox Opal just yet as he has only 2 artifacts. We'll go over to Daniel's side. Now, it looks like Adrian does have an Ensnaring Bridge in his opener. He mentioned in these first pre-board games, there's no answer to it on the board. Fortunately for Daniel, he has a copy of Thoughtseize in the opener.
Unless Daniel has another discard spell and or a Stubborn Denial, gotta imagine he'll be reaching for that bridge. Looks like Daniel does have a couple discard spells here, though, so there are several potential options here. You got Ancient Stirrings, looks like 2 Inquisition of Kozilek and Ensnaring Bridge.
Yeah, so Adrian's going to be set up here to fight a discard fight. Interestingly, because there's no more artifacts in Adrian's hand, that Mox Opal is actually not working just yet.
His deck pretty capable of drawing out of that, and you see he was left with the Ancient Stirrings. The Spire of Industry can make green mana. He does control artifacts.
Adrian drawing another Ensnaring Bridge, looks like, for the turn. He'll cast Ancient Stirrings. Just needs to get up to that 3 mana. If he can stick 1 on the board, it's a big win for Adrian.
That always seems to happen, right? You Thoughtseize your opponent and
then
they draw the card.
Yeah.
Happens every time with Vendilion Click.
That card's just a 3-1 flash.
You get to see their hand.
That's true. It's going to be Glimmer Void that Adrian takes off of Ancient Stirrings. He'll play the land, and then Inquisition of Kozilek Daniel back. We see from Daniel, Snapcaster Mage, Gurmag Angler, Liliana of the Veil, 3 lands.
Pretty flooded here for the Grixis Shadow deck. This deck plays fewer than 20 lands, 18 in most lists. I believe that's what Fournier, 19 actually this weekend for Fournier.
And if that last card that Adrian picked up with the draw step is another Ensnaring Bridge, this is a tight situation for Daniel. He may not be able to get it out of Adrian's hand. You see Snapcaster Mage the take from Sullivan.
You know, the 2 things he was looking at, it will be pretty easy for Adrian to deal with the Gurmag Angler. His plan is Ensnaring Bridge. If he doesn't get that, he can't win this game anyway. So you look at Snapcaster Mage and Liliana of the Veil. If he finds Pithing Needle, which his deck's pretty good at finding, he has all the Ancient Stirrings, that makes Liliana of the Veil a non-issue. The Snapcaster Mage can flashback discard spells, Stubborn Denial, what have you.
I guess you're right. We mentioned that Liliana of the Veil is an answer-ish to Ensnaring Bridge, and if Adrian makes Bridge, Daniel will have Liliana to respond. Fetch Shock for Fournier. His draw for the turn was a copy of Street Wraith, and it looks like he's trying to get a land out of his deck before cycling the 3-4.
He definitely does not want to draw any more lands from here. That much is certainly true.
Yeah. Another discard spell would be just about ideal for Fournier here. His hand right now, Liliana, Gurmag Angler, a pair of lands, and a Street Wraith. there's the cycle. Daniel down to 11. And can he hit a discard spell? Looks like he hit another land.
It was the opposite of what he wanted.
Right, so if that card in Adrian's hand is Ensnaring Bridge, it's going to happen, and Daniel no plays. He'll just pass. And does Adrian have it? He's still actually short on artifacts. He'll cast Codex Shredder, then cast Inquisition of Kozilek. That'll take care of the Liliana. Now that he has Metalcraft, that Mox Opal is online next turn. Adrian has one card left in his hand, and that one card is Ensnaring Bridge. Daniel needs to get him to discard it right now. And it is a Watery Grave for Fournier, so that's not going to be good enough.
Very unfortunate string of top decks here.
Yeah, a Thoughtseize would be perfect. Could have Thoughtseized and made a 5/5.
And once again, that bridge, that's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for Fournier to overcome. No Kolaghan's Command in the deck.
Yeah, you mentioned 2 Liliana the Veil are his only counters for it. One of them is already in the graveyard. Here's Gurmag Angler. He'll pass. So he has one spell left in his deck to answer Ensnaring Bridge and no burn. Adrian, Ghoul Caller's Bell. And maybe that's not Bridge in his hand. We're going to have to... We'll wait and see here. I would think it's likely not.
Not
so
casting
Daniel gets
there.
another turn. Yeah, you would have cast it. Okay, so we have a mystery card in Adrian's hand. We'll see if he can get that bridge down before Gurmag Angler kills him. Adrian Sullivan goes to 14. Land and a pass. Adrian will mill again. Mills over Abrupt Decay. Mills over Thoughtseize.
You got to remember the extra ability on Codex Shredder. You can sacrifice it for 5 mana to return a card from your graveyard to your hand.
Right. If Adrian starts top decking a lot of lands here, maybe that's a line. Gurmag Angler, though, is going to hit pretty hard. You notice Adrian did not use Ghoul Caller's Bell that turn. Didn't want to mill Daniel.
Grixis Shadow does have some play from its graveyard as well. You have your Delve Threats, your Snapcaster Mage. Frequently putting cards in their graveyard does help them out.
Here's Crucible of Worlds from Adrian Sullivan. That will help him build up toward that play you were mentioning of buy back the bridge with Codex Shredder and cast it. You see Glimmer Void played out of the graveyard for Adrian, and he's milling himself to try to hit those land drops.
Yep. And just one more land here. He'll be able to activate the Codex Shredder on the following turn, get the bridge back.
First result in here on the backup match. Todd Anderson on the draw takes game 1 over Daniel Byington.
And one of the concerns if your play is setting up bridge like this is that you don't ring the bell, because if you flip over a Stubborn Denial for Fournier and he draws a Snapcaster Mage, you just gave him that.
Especially with Gurmag Angler, that's not just a force spike, it's a negate. Fournier is going to go ahead and Thought Scour himself. Terminate and an Inquisition in the graveyard, and he draws Snapcaster Mage. Swings for 5, Adrian down to 9. So now we get some options here. Terminate not really going to play, but Inquisition of Kozilek, possibly Snapcaster Mage. Thought Scour, another one. Daniel, another land. He'll shock down to 9. It's going to be Snapcaster. We'll see which 1-mana card he picks.
Actually, Tasigur the play.
Oh, Tasigur. Okay. So that actually is 9 power. This means that plan of Codex Shreddering back a bridge and casting it, that's not fast enough anymore.
Right. Fournier now has lethal attackers on the battlefield. Sullivan needs an Ensnaring Bridge right now.
Ghoul Caller's Bell, Codex Shredder, Thoughtseize. These are all milled into Adrian's graveyard. He has land 5. If he had more time, he could set up this bridge. Not clear that he does. He'll Ghoul Caller's Bell both players in his upkeep. And what do you suppose he's looking for that's making him do this during upkeep?
So on average, if you bell yourself, you technically increase your odds of drawing the bridge on this turn. If you don't mill bridge specifically, you're drawing 1 in 38 instead of 1 in 39. He doesn't have Academy Ruins or anything. He can't put it on top of his deck already.
It's still a 1-outer out of 39. I guess you can choose to draw the top card of your deck or the second to top card of your deck.
It's the always loot question, right? You know,
no,
we won't get Twitter into that. And now he's shredding himself, but
he shreds himself into the ensnaring bridge.
He can't do anything. He can't get that back and pay for it on this turn cycle.
Here's Academy Ruins into the graveyard.
Now he's just seeing if there's literally anything he can do. I believe that he is just dead from here.
Well, let's see what his last card is. Something, I guess Abrupt Decay doesn't really help him.
Right, he had a 6-mana threat and a 7-mana set threat on the other side of the battlefield. Nothing like go for the throat in the deck. He does play some main deck Collective Brutalities.
Okay, that could gain him life. That could gain him 2 life points. Then he could Academy Ruins back the bridge. No, that would actually work.
Yeah, with the Academy Ruins, it does give him enough mana to put that back on top.
I think he might have that. Yeah, Collective Brutality. Hold on here.
He needs to fade 2 turns of counter spells, but if he's able to do that, this will lock up the game.
Yeah, so here's the Collective Brutality. Adrian goes to a very relevant 11. Now, interestingly, he chose not to escalate. So that other card in his hand, not entirely sure what it is.
And for Fournier, no Lightning Bolts, no Kolaghan's Command, no Collective Brutalities of his own in the main deck.
Right. Thought Scour. Fournier picks it on himself. Mills Serum Visions, Tassiger draws a card. He has a Thoughtseize in hand. That's not going to play as Adrian's setup for this bridge is Academy Ruins and then drawing it.
And for main deck counter spells, it's just 2 Stubborn Denial. Well, actually, Fournier just cast Thought Scour. If he waited for Adrian to put the bridge on top of his deck, he could have targeted Adrian with that Thought Scour. If he doesn't have a counter
for 9.
spell,
Yeah, Adrian's at 2. That might have been a miss from Daniel. Yeah, his hand is Thoughtseize and 2 lands. You're right, it can go to both players. He may have just missed that. Adrian end step puts Ensnaring Bridge on top of the deck. Does Daniel have a Snapcaster Mage? Any way to cast a Thought Scour here?
That's what he's going to need.
I think Daniel realizing it right now. Let's see what he has in play. Gonna crack a fetch land. This is all still on his own end step.
The way this is set up, it looks like he's activating Tassiger and hoping that Adrian punts back.
I don't think that's gonna work.
I agree.
All right, yeah, it's a Tassiger activation. Mills 2 and just hands it to Adrian. Adrian needs to see it. Don't give him the Thought Scour.
Yeah, the Tassiger is dead enough.
Second Tassiger? Yeah, that's fine.
You give him Serum Visions too, is what he's looking at. Doesn't really matter.
Wow, okay. Yeah, we're on Daniel's end step, so it's safe to give him Serum Visions because he can't cast it until the bridge is already in play. And Daniel passes, he says go. And Adrian Sullivan will get to draw the Ensnaring Bridge. So, Inquisition of Kozilek looks to be Adrian's last card. Here's the discard spell. Serum Visions, Thoughtseize land. He'll take that Serum Visions, yep. And now Ensnaring Bridge is down. Adrian's at 2, but the bridge is in play. Daniel has only 1 card in his whole deck that can answer it in play. It's the second copy of Liliana of the Veil.
And again, that's just not a realistic turn of events. It just kind of factor fictions permanence. Odds of Adrian sacrificing his Ensnaring Bridge, basically 0.
Yeah, and you might look for a way to push 2 damage across. And no Kolaghan's commands for Fournier, so he actually can't make that play.
In a normal situation, Adrian not having a Lantern, that might be nice for Daniel. He'd have some time to find those reach spells, but they're just not in his deck.
On our backup match, Daniel Byington takes game 2 against Todd Anderson. So as the players to move to sideboard, things are going to be tied up 1-1. Now I see Adrian going to go for some self-mill here. 3 more cards into the yard.
And Adrian does have Academy Ruins. There's no risk of him milling himself. He's going to take his time, look at some extra cards, find more Codex Shredders, possibly a Lantern of Insight first, though deck lists are face up. He knows that he's not live to realistically lose to anything. Just needs to make sure to only draw 1 card a turn, not flip over too many cards with his bells, and he should be good.
Yeah, he'll use Academy Ruins to put Lantern of Insight on top of his deck, cast it, so now has 3 bell effects with Lantern in play. This is the lock. And to be honest, he probably doesn't even need Lantern of Insight to win this game. The Ensnaring Bridge is just so safe. Daniel checking, does Adrian get to see the top card? Yes, he does. Daniel will get a Fatal Pushback in his hand. Outside of that Liliana of the Veil, though, and remember, Adrian meticulously studied these deck lists. It just, there don't seem to be outs for Fournier.
If Adrian doesn't play it careful and ends up with a very small number of cards in his deck, and I mean 0, 1, or 2, and he has to put a card on top of his deck, well, I guess it's 0 or 1, and
then the
Daniel
Thought Scour
tags him with a
kill
Thought
him.
Scour, or if it's, I guess it's up to 4 and Daniel has double Thought Scour, or up to 3, rather.
Right. Yeah, I mean, generally, Adrian can safely mill both players out because he has an Academy Ruins. So then when he goes to draw a card to lose the game, the Ruins will save him.
That's a very small margin, a play I would not expect from Adrian.
Yeah, and then even on top of that, there may not be that much reason for him to get his library that low. You see now the Codex Shredders are starting to go at Fournier.
And something we talked about earlier in the broadcast, we had Adrian on camera previously in the tournament. Frequently, you just don't activate Codex Shredder if you don't have to.
Yeah, it's like he has a Gurmag Angler. You don't.
The thing about this, though, is that with decklist face up, he just knows that Daniel's not drawing it to anything.
Mills his own Inventor's Fair, then plays it out of the yard using Crucible of Worlds. Casts another Codex Shredder. Adrian will start gaining life now, thanks to the Inventor's Fair, but he's going to go get another artifact with it. And that's going to be another Ghoul Caller's Bell.
Still interested in milling himself. It helps him find the other artifacts he wants faster.
Yeah, I mean, this speeds up his win. I don't know if he needs any more artifacts.
He's well beyond the point of need.
Yeah.
He has everything he needs to win the game.
Well, and every turn, thanks to that Crucible, he'll actually have Inventor's Fair. So he gets to tutor up an artifact every turn of this game.
On top of a draw step. That's a pretty nice position to be in.
Right.
Now, the real question here is how much more of this punishment can Daniel take?
Yeah, and that's enough. So game 1 will go to Adrian Sullivan with Lantern Control. A close one indeed. Adrian goes down to 2 off a pair of Delve creatures and dodges a window there where it looks like he could have lost.
Right, and Daniel's going to be thinking about that Thought Scour for a long time.
Our player's going to go ahead. So remember, because we are in a best-of-5 match, players are not allowed to sideboard just yet. So game 2, we'll put Fournier on the play. Both players still with their game 1 configurations.
This time he's looking to leverage some discard spells, hopefully draw a Stubborn Denial.
Right, so you're looking at, yeah, those. He did manage to successfully Thoughtseize, use a discard spell on an Ensnaring Bridge during that game. That was nice. Never found a Stubborn Denial.
And there are only 2, so it's a small percentage.
So then you have to look at how fast his clock was. That game, he didn't make a creature until turn 3 or 4 with the first Gurmag Angler, and eventually Tassiger joined it to knock another turn off the clock. Is that about the pace of draw we were going to expect here?
Yeah, with the Grixis version of Death Shadow, when you don't have the Jund Traverse package, it can take you some time to set up a threat. I think that's about expectation. He can go faster, generally won't.
So this Season 1 Invitational is the last weekend before the pre-release. Pre-release next week is the Hour of Devastation pre-release, which means, of course, we are going to have a playmat. This is the Owl of Devastation. This is being given away at the pre-release at the Star City Games Game Center in Roanoke, Virginia, and actually at stores all around the country. So you can collect this at participating stores. You can find out where they are, starcitygames.com/pre-release. Make sure to register today, as playmats may be limited.
I would definitely want that one. And I have too many playmats. If I had to estimate, I must have at least 40 of them.
You can never have too many playmats. You just be that guy. You just stack them on top of each other.
If you could build a fort out of playmats, I'd be more on board. That's really more of a pillow game.
Well, my mouse pad's a playmat.
Yeah, same. I just have two playmats across my desk.
Slowly, all the surfaces in my house are getting covered in playmats. Like my dresser has playmats on it now.
Yeah, I definitely have the friends that just have playmats at their dining room table because it keeps the table cleaner.
Yeah. Yep. That.
They do not live with their significant others. I will say that.
Everybody likes dragons, right? All right, game 2 underway. Both players keeping on 7. We will see Thoughtseize from Daniel Fournier. So let's get a look over at the Lantern control player's hand. He's got an Ancient Stirrings. He's got 2 copies of Lantern of Insight. He has 1 land, 1 Mox Opal, a Ghoulcaller's Bell, and an Inquisition of Kozilek.
I assume this hand is fine.
You know, it's got what? It's got the Lantern, it's got a mill piece, and it's got a Mox Opal. That's got to be, and a discard spell. This is probably above average for Lantern.
Yeah, I would believe it. A lot of stuff you can do for 1 mana. Won't take long to set up the Opal as well.
Yeah, I mean, interested to see what Daniel takes here. If he takes Ghoulcaller's Bell, he gets rid of the interaction of Lantern plus a mill card. At the same time, taking Mox Opal just always seems great to me. It's by far the best card in Adrian's deck.
And we're at a stage of the game where you're kind of far from Adrian actually activating the Bell anyway. You know, it's going to benefit Fournier on a lot of the turns.
Wow, he's going to take Ancient Stirrings. So that seems like the type of game plan where he's going to try to keep Adrian just off the card in Snaring Bridge.
And he can beat the stuff already in Adrian's hand. That shouldn't really be an issue. Ancient Stirrings is the most powerful card selection spell in Modern.
Inquisition of Kozilek from Adrian Sullivan. Let's take a look at Fournier's hand. He's got a 2nd land. He's got Tasigur, Snapcaster Mage, Thought Scour, and Thoughtseize.
With the context of Adrian's hand, now that he's missing that Stirrings, the Thoughtseize is actually not terribly threatening. Ideally, Adrian would be casting Thoughtseize because the Tasigur is actually the most interesting thing to go for. He'll be able to cast that on the following turn, given that Daniel does have that Thought Scour. You could go for Thought Scour for that reason, though if Daniel draws another Thought Scour or a fetch land, you'll still be able to Tasigur on the following turn.
Yeah, since there's no Kolaghan's commands in Daniel's deck, Snapcaster Mage loses a lot of value here.
Absolutely.
I'd say normally I would think you'd want to take the Snapcaster Mage.
Thought Scour actually technically gives Daniel higher access to Stubborn Denial because he has that Snapcaster Mage.
Right. The Thoughtseize, remember, Adrian's hand has 2 Lanterns of Insight and then a Codex Shredder and a Ghoulcaller's Bell. So it's pretty Thoughtseize proof here.
I'm leaning Thought Scour here. You know, we'll see what Adrian does.
And that is what he does. He'll take the Thought Scour. We'll go back over to Fournier.
And there's a small number of cards he can draw. Looks like he did peel a Polluted Delta. That had a high potential to be very tempo positive for Adrian. Wouldn't always work out, though.
Yeah, the fetch land is nice. And actually, Daniel will delay his Tasigur for a turn.
Actually, you won't. The Thoughtseize will go to the graveyard.
Oh, you're right. No, you can do it. He can have it all.
Yep.
Thoughtseize from Daniel will take the Codex Shredder out of Adrian's hand. On our backup match, the first sideboard games in the books, it is now Daniel Byington up 2-1 over Todd Anderson. Byington, another Eldrazi Tron player. Todd on Grixis Death's Shadow. So Codex Shredder gone. Fournier will go ahead and crack a fetch land, and it looks like cast a Tasigur for 1 mana.
And given that none of the cards in his graveyard are Stubborn Denial, it's pretty free to exile all of these. You don't really care about those discard spells going forward. Thought Scour is okay, but
yeah,
you want to get on the table.
I'd say losing the Thought Scour has some value, but a 4/5 is too good to pass up, and he won't.
Right. If you use your Snapcaster to cast a Thought Scour, you can't flash back a Stubborn Denial anyway.
Right. Ideally, he'd like to draw Stubborn Denial, then have Tasigur denial, Snapcaster second denial. That sounds like a win for Daniel.
And at least for the immediate future, he is sitting pretty.
A Thoughtseize from Adrian Sullivan. And then pass. Now this is interesting. He has this Mox Opal in play and all these artifacts, but Adrian continues to cast non-artifact spells.
Yeah, there was a lot of incentive to get the Snapcaster Mage out of the hand. It would speed up Fournier's clock.
Yeah. You see right now a swing for 4, Adrian to 14. Fournier lost his Snapcaster Mage to the Thoughtseize, but he did draw a Stubborn Denial.
It's going to be very difficult for Adrian to claw his way out of this one.
An interesting bind from in Adrian Sullivan's spot. He started this game on 1 land and Mox Opal. Each turn he had the option of playing an artifact lock piece or playing a discard spell. The discard spells seem so relevant because he needed them fast, but they don't build him toward that Metalcraft. And now he finds himself stuck on 1 mana.
From this position, he's going to need to assemble the ability to produce 2 more mana. That can be achieving Metalcraft and a land or 2 lands. He's going to need to be able to cast at least 2 Ensnaring Bridge because of that counterspell.
Tasigur will swing Sullivan down to 10.
I just don't think he has that kind of time.
Ghoul Caller's Bell. Adrian drew his copy of Girapur Aether Grid.
And I'm pretty sure on the previous turn he drew Crucible of Worlds, which is really not
none
what
of
he wants.
these 3 mana spells. Mana's already. He'd love to just draw a land. He does assemble Metalcraft though. Casts Lantern of Insight and now another Lantern of Insight. We'll see. It looks like Daniel Fournier is just holding that Stubborn Denial for a possible Ensnaring Bridge, and I like that too.
He already has everything he needs to win on the table.
If he could take a turn off Adrian's clock, I think he'd be interested in that. Now Adrian has to decide whether or not he is content to let Fournier draw Serum Visions. Says sure. Top card, Bloodstained Mire. I always like it when you have cards like Serum Visions and your opponent has a Lantern of Insight. It changes the gameplay on these cards. You know, it's not a random draw anymore. It's 1 blue to draw a land. No.
And for that reason, when you're on the Grixis side, frequently you'll take a little bit of time, maybe produce multiple fetch lands, get to a turn where you have multiple Serum Visions if you're allowed to.
Yeah.
Have a little bit more control.
Serum Visions actually loses a lot of value against Lantern of Insight.
Yes.
It's not really a cantrip. It's just a bad card. You see, cast it in and says, yeah, you can draw a land, but if you scry something good to the top, I'm going to mill it.
Yep. There's still the upside of scrying something bad to the bottom. It's just not as high.
And I like this. We keep Street Wraith on top. That's one that disguises his top card.
And it's something you can always use to draw in response to a bell activation.
Right. Instant speed card draw can mess with the Lantern player. Another fetch land, and then Fournier looks to pass the turn. Having that fetch land in play is going to be nice. He's actually going to use it right here to shuffle the deck.
This is one of those matchups where there's really no concern about your life total. You see Fournier has done a lot of damage to himself.
Is that 7?
Adrian's not going to get any chip shots in.
He
does play a couple of Girapur Aether Grid.
And it's in his hand. That's not what
you
this is
don't want to
about.
go to 1 or 2, but 7 is fine.
Thought Scour on top of Fournier's deck. He'll swing for 4. Sullivan down to 6. And here's Gurmag Angler from Daniel. So that will make this a 1-turn clock. That last card is the all-important Stubborn Denial. This looks like a great spot for Grixis.
Adrian will be able to cast at most 1 relevant spell on the following turn. Daniel's got that covered. Adrian's taking some time thinking about what he can draw to if he bells himself here. Because there's a better alternative than drawing the land. And there's really not in the deck. He needs the land to have Ensnaring Bridge mana. He needs to draw a bridge on top of that. Doesn't have any way to draw extra cards from here.
And yeah, wondering if he has a sequence here. He can't both draw the Ensnaring Bridge and the mana to cast it. Now, what Aaron doesn't know is the Stubborn Denial makes this decision of his pretty irrelevant.
Right. He just got to play like that one's not there.
Right. And even if it wasn't there, I don't know. Yeah, Adrian's just going to concede. There's no way to draw the land and the bridge.
And again, these are on-time rounds. Take your time. Think about it.
So the pre-board games are in the books. They are split 1-1 between the two players. That means we're going to go to the sideboard for game number 3. All things evened up. Let's go ahead and look at what each player can bring in. So I do want to start on Daniel Fournier's side. We saw some real vulnerability to ensnaring bridge in the pre-board games. He just could never let it resolve. Does any of that change as we go to the post-board?
On the table, no. You got to counter that one. He does have a lot more ability to keep it off the table. We go down the list. We have 3 Ceremonious Rejection, 3 Leyline of the Void, 2 Collective Brutality, 2 Is It Static Caster, 2 Stubborn Denial, a Disdainful Stroke, a Liliana of the Veil, and a Kozilek's Return. Most of the counter spells are coming in. Disdainful Stroke doesn't quite hit what you need to. If it was 3 or greater, that'd be good, because it's 4 or greater, Adrian's not casting any of those spells. Ceremonious Rejection is going to be excellent, however.
Yeah, his whole deck's colorless. It sounds great.
What he wanted to draw the entirety of game 1 and 2 was Stubborn Denial. More copies of that, sign me up. Liliana of the Veil is fine. It's really, I wouldn't be excited to go up on this card.
So I'm interested in the Stubborn Denial and the Ceremonious Rejection. The card that interests me here is, how do you feel about Leyline of the Void in this matchup?
I have not experimented with it. If I had no playtest experience with this, I would stay away. It shuts off some things. Adrian has the Codex Shredders. He's got the Academy Ruins. He plays out of the graveyard to an extent.
Crucible. But it never seemed like Crucible was the thing that made or break, was the make or break card.
Exactly. And in particular, because I'm going heavy on counter spells, I feel like I can control a lot more of his ability to play out of the graveyard in the first place.
Yeah, we might see them. I think the reason we might see them, I'm looking at 4 Fatal Push to Terminate.
You got to get them out.
Okay, yeah, there might just be enough junk in the main deck that Leyline of the Void comes in.
Right.
That remains to be seen. Now on Adrian Sullivan's side, he's got a great sideboard here. He's 13 different cards. Doubles on Grafdigger's Cage and Welding Jar. And after that, here are the one-ups. Abrupt Decay, Collective Brutality, Gaddock Teague, White Leyline, Magus of the Moat. Yes, that is the Magus of the Moat, the 0/3 that makes flyers, only flyers be able to attack. Nature's Claim, Padim Council of Innovation from Kaladesh gives his artifacts hexproof. Pithing Needle, Phyrexian Metamorph, Seal of Primordium, and Spellskite.
So you have some interesting things here that you might normally see Adrian bring in the dark against Grixis Shadow. So you'd have your Welding Jars and your Padims.
Right.
Because Daniel can't destroy any artifacts, you certainly won't be seeing Welding Jar here.
Right. There's no point in that. It's all of this is going to take place is on the stack.
Padim draws extra cards. That one actually might still come in. And then you have answers to all of Daniel's creatures in Magus of the Moat. That one I expect will come in here. Daniel's got to be aware and have an answer for that one.
Yeah, but outside of that, I mean, there's the issue is that Daniel can sit on a ton of counter spells. They all cost 1 mana. And Adrian, say this Ensnaring Bridge, how is he going to resolve it through 4 Stubborn Denials and 3 Ceremonious Rejections?
Adrian does have his own discard spells, and he can go for this Collective Brutality out of the sideboard as well. That helps him get ahead of those counters.
I mean, it feels like he might have to if he wants to win the counter war.
Right. And then he has a Phyrexian Metamorph as well. I don't think this is the matchup for that one, as cool as it is. Technically, if you copy your opponent's Tasigur, that's kind of like a removal spell. It's a little fancy.
So we're here in the quarterfinals of the Season 1 Invitational. Now, you might ask how these players got to the Invitational. Top 8ing an SCG Open during this season would have qualified for them. On top of that, they can do it via the Invitational qualifiers. These are the StarCityGames.com events. They happen at stores around the country. So these have a lot of prizes exclusive to them. There's a $1,000 prize in the top 8. I mentioned Invitational qualifications on the line here. The prizes have 2 invitations included to the Season 2 Invitational from the next season. Top 8 pin, playmat, and then the tokens from the Invitational. You can find one near you at StarCityGames.com/IQ. It's interesting to see so much counter magic in the Grixis side of this. A lot of times I would think against this style deck, you'd be looking at artifact destruction, not this control idea.
And usually you would. It's sort of the way that the metagame has adapted. You've seen moving in the direction of Ceremonious Rejection. A big part of that is because of Eldrazi Tron, whereas against the other colorless decks, your Lantern controls your affinity, you'd rather have Kolaghan's Command, but you're kind of being pushed in this direction because of Eldrazi Tron. And again, Daniel kind of got a rough pull here. There were 2 Eldrazi Tron players in the top 8 versus the 1 Lantern control.
And in a lot of ways, when you look at Adrian's sideboard, it had not adapted to the counter-heavy plan. If Daniel's plan was to use removal spells and artifacts, Adrian would have an excellent sideboard plan here. But we looked at cards, you mentioned 2 Welding Jars, 1 Padim, things like that. You know, a Spellskite, a Gaddock Teague. None of those actually play.
Right.
Adrian contemplating a 6-card hand right now. It's so hard to mulligan against a deck with as much discard as Grixis.
You are absolutely correct. Yeah, if you expected a lot of counterspells, that's kind of the thing about counterspells in Modern. There's usually 1, maybe 2 good decks that play counterspells. It's going to be less than 20% of the room, for sure. So you could put Defense Grid in your sideboard, but it's going to be pretty bad on average.
Turn 1, Blooming Marsh into Ghoul Caller's Bell for Adrian Sullivan. We're underway with game number 3 here of our quarterfinal match. And green here for Adrian, no discard out of the gates from Daniel. So Ancient Stirrings from Adrian. We do have to look out for cards like Stubborn Denial in these situations.
I'd be relatively excited to counterspell Ancient Stirrings. It is one of Adrian's better cards.
5, you can select any colorless card.
If you're light on counterspells, you do want to save them for the bridges themselves, though.
Another Blooming Marsh for Adrian Sullivan. He passed up a Codex Shredder to take that. Now over on our backup match, it looks like it's going to be going the full 5 games. Todd Anderson wins game 4. So between Todd Anderson's Grixis Death Shadow deck and Daniel Byington's Eldrazi Tron, it'll be down to game 5 to see who goes to the semifinals.
Yep, and that is a very close matchup, so it makes a lot of sense to go into game 5.
Yeah, the winner of that will be playing the winner of this match. So Adrian plays the land he found off Ancient Stirrings and then just passes the turn again. End step, Daniel will Thought Scour himself, building up toward some of those Delve creatures.
Flipped over a Snapcaster Mage. That's a lot better when you have Kolaghan's Command in your deck. He does have the Rise Fall.
Yeah, well, still with all those counter spells, the 1-mana counters, it seems like he'd want that card. Inquisition of Kozilek now fired off from Fournier. We'll see Adrian's hand. Ghost Quarter as land 3. Collective Brutality, Ensnaring Bridge, and Crucible of Worlds. Now, Ryan, if I'm in Daniel's side, I don't want to get too fancy here. Ensnaring Bridge is the card that beats me.
Yep. It's really difficult to leave Adrian with a bridge in hand. You know, the Crucible actually looks relatively powerful here.
Yeah, I mean, there is a Ghost Quarter and a Crucible. Is that scary enough that Daniel might have to take the Crucible?
Really depends what the rest of his hand is. You know, if he has some counter spells / some threats,
Yeah.
that's fine.
I guess if he just has a Ceremonious Rejection, then who cares? He's got it all.
Yep.
He's going to take Collective Brutality. That's a horrible sign for Adrian.
You got to feel bad about that one.
He just took the card that doesn't matter. If I'm Adrian, I don't think any of these things are resolving now.
Well, I guess I'll cast my bridges, and maybe you'll run out of counter spells, and I'll draw more bridges.
Yeah. Here's Ghost Quarter from Adrian. Which artifacts does he want to see countered first?
Makes sense to go for the Crucible first. This just really reads like a counter spell.
Oh, yeah. But we don't know. I mean, you have to wonder if it's Ceremonious Rejection or Stubborn Denial. If it's Stubborn Denial, then doing nothing and playing a 4th land might actually reward you here.
Fair
if it's
enough.
Ceremonious Rejection, who cares?
The thing about the Crucible is, like, there's a small chance that Daniel lets it resolve.
Oh, and this is nice. Inquisition of Kozilek was the draw for Adrian, and he'll spend the entire turn doing that. I really like this. Not only does it probably take a Ceremonious Rejection, it also gives him information, which is key.
Right.
He has both.
Kind of. And a Snapcaster Mage.
So
And a Rise Fall for the Snapcaster Mage already in his graveyard.
Stubborn Denial, Ceremonious Rejection, Snapcaster Mage, Rise Fall, land number 3 to Snapcaster back those counter spells. Oh, and then here's a win condition, Death Shadow.
I would say that this hand is above average.
Adrian's gonna need a lot of good draws to beat this one.
Yeah, Fournier keeps drawing like this, these sideboard games are going to be really tough.
Adrian takes Risefall, and you know what? He has to take that card. He has 2 cards in hand, and Daniel knows what they are, and they aren't lands.
Correction, he cannot take Risefall.
Right. That's a new rule change, right?
Yes, currently split cards exist as the total converted mana cost of both sides when they are not on the stack.
So it used to be about a couple months ago, this Risefall's converted mana cost would be 2 and 2. But now the rule has changed where it is 4. Not only can Adrian not take it, but those 2 cards in his hand, they're going away.
Yep.
When you see it on your face, there's that smirk. Well then.
I'm not really into discarding my hand.
Yeah. Daniel can take both Adrian's cards, leave up Ceremonious Rejection. Okay, so Adrian will take the Ceremonious. And go. Oh my. Just in case your opponent didn't see how good Risefall was, by trying to take it, Adrian has pointed out to Daniel that it is indeed the best play.
Oh, I guess you're just going to cast him to Turok on the following turn.
Yeah. Wow.
That card is a lot better in Modern than it ever was when it was Standard legal. Decks are more land light. You have your Thoughtseize or Inquisition, so you know that you're hitting 2 cards.
This is just so powerful for Daniel. Fetch land, rise, fall. Discard 2 cards at random unless they're lands.
I don't approve of that randomization. That could have been done better.
You gotta lay out and be like 1 and 2.
Yeah,
and
this is a high stakes event.
Adrian draws, passes the turn. You see Daniel really just hiding behind those counter spells. He could have made Death's Shadow last turn, chose not to. Wants to keep up the stubborn denial he has. So now he will fetch with that Scalding Tarn back on his turn. Go to 11. And this is just perfect. He has in hand another Shockland. He can shock down to 9, cast the Death's Shadow. It's a 4/4, which is just the right size for Stubborn Denial.
Just the right size for Stubborn Denial. Just 2 points too big for Adrian to be able to draw Collective Brutality and kill it.
Oh, and there's still that Snapcaster Mage for the Ceremonious Rejection, and he'll have the mana for that.
Not bad.
Down to 9 for Fournier. And then here's Death Shadow, currently a 4/4. Sullivan will draw. The cards he knows about in Daniel's hand are Stubborn Denial, Snapcaster Mage. Not sure he can beat those, not to mention the other cards Daniel's drawn since.
And from the point where Adrian knew about those cards, he has been empty-handed. Not a lot to work with for Adrian Sullivan. Just pass back so Fournier can attack with his Death Shadow. Looks like Fournier not drawing any more ways to hurt himself, so it is just going to be 4 for now, but that is more than enough. Four-turn clock against several relevant interactive spells.
Serum Visions from Daniel. Scries both to the top.
Oh, goody.
Ooh. This is hard, but when you play a deck like Lantern, that's a high synergy deck, but your individual cards are low powered. These games where your opponent's just casting great cards against you can snowball so quickly.
Are you suggesting that Ghoul Caller's Bell is less powerful than Death Shadow?
Well, I guess they're both situational, right?
Well, I guess you do have to pay colored mana for Death Shadow.
Yeah, first you have
Whereas
to play,
anybody can put Ghoul Caller's
you
Bell
have to
in their
play
deck.
fetch lands and shock lands for Death Shadow. There's a lot of things, it's asking a lot.
There's some real costs.
Adrian does get up to 4 lands here. It's going to be a Concealed Courtyard. He's taking 1 hit off the Death Shadow right now. Adrian's down to 16. Make that 12 on another attack. Daniel, 6 cards in hand.
Still just hanging out with that
Yeah,
Snapcaster Mage.
just says go.
Committing the Snapcaster Mage in this turn cycle does change the clock, but I don't
Who
feel like
needs
that's
it?
relevant.
Yeah. I mean, you have this wall of counter spells. I'm not sure I want to. You're right. A turn, taking a turn off the clock is nice. I don't know that I care.
I believe that Daniel has a Swamp in his hand as well. In theory, he could have cast Snapcaster, flashback, fall, left up a counter spell, but who needs to do that?
We do have a result here from our backup match. Grixis Death's Shadow will be in the semifinals. In a decisive Game 5, it is Todd Anderson, 3-2, moving on, where he will await the winner of this match.
Nice. Congratulations to Todd. You know what that means?
What's that?
I am 0 for 3 in my quarterfinal predictions.
I got the Todd one right on accident, so I'm beating you, but only by 1.
Wouldn't be the first time I lost to the margin of error.
I don't deserve it, but I'll take credit for it. Thoughtseize will take care of Adrian's Ensnaring Bridge, leaving Adrian with a land and a discard spell. Also, taking a turn off the clock, Fournier went down to 7 on the Thoughtseize, swings for 6. Looks like 6 more coming. Adrian's going to draw a card. It's Surgical Extraction. That certainly doesn't do anything. It will allow him to look at Fournier's sideboarding strategy.
Yep.
And I expect Adrian to use that to his fullest advantage. He's going to cast it here, look at Daniel's whole deck, and then concede. Here is the Surgical. And I like how Adrian did this. He took the counter spell. Yeah, and there's another stubborn analogy. Daniel says, no, you don't get to look at my deck. He was trying to take the counter spells so that it would resolve, and then you get that value. And I like, not only does Adrian go for that extra value, Daniel's heads up on enough to not allow him to have it.
No, you can't see my deck. We have games to play.
Yeah, so Daniel Fournier with the first sideboarded game, he's going to win that one up 2-1. And Ryan, after this sideboard plan, it looks to me like Grixis Death's Shadow is a favorite here.
Just the density of these counter spells. That is a lot for Adrian to overcome.
Yeah, we saw that hand of Ceremonious Rejection, Stubborn Denial, Snapcaster Mage. That's just a monster against this Lantern deck.
And some discard spells to supplement.
Yeah, it feels like Adrian needed both games 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm. And Daniel's going to have at least one more crack at being on the play. It's going to be on the draw for Game 4, but if we get a Game 5...
Daniel's on the play. Right. It's going to be a tough one here. So they're going to go back to their deck lists. Well, the issue here seems like Adrian has to resolve 3 mana spells, whether it's Crucible of Worlds, whether it's Ensnaring Bridge, and just there's so many ways between Thoughtseize, 8 discard spells and 7 counter spells and 4 Snapcaster Mages. I'm just not sure Adrian's going to be able to do that.
Yeah, and in that game, it is true, Adrian did take a mulligan, and Daniel, I would say that the draw was certainly above average. Yeah, but Daniel could draw significantly worse than that to still be able to win games. And that's kind of what this Grixis deck does, Previous iterations of Death's Shadow, if you recall when Gitaxian and Pro were legal, they were the all-in combo deck. If you brought in hate for them, it was bad for them. But on average, Grixis Death's Shadow just gets a lot better in the sideboard games. It's really more like a Jund.
Yeah, and it's, it certainly is playing out that way right now. So one of the things on the line, you mentioned that Invitational token. So many players with it. The most recent champion was Jacob Baugh. He won back in Atlanta, Season 3 of last year. He was our champion with the Aetherworks Marvel deck. Got his likeness on a card here, you see, of Team Card Hoarder on the Energy Reserve token. Now, time is running out to get one of these, as the winner this weekend will be choosing a new token. We don't have any more opens to go to, but they still are shipping in all orders from StarCityGames.com of at least $5. So make sure you get that in the next week to get one of these tokens.
Teamer Energy, currently one of the more played decks in Standard. Got to track that energy somehow.
Yeah, it's really nice when a card like Marvel gets banned and then the best deck doesn't change. Ancient Stirrings, turn 1 from Adrian. Both players on 7-card hands for Game 4. We see Leyline of Sanctities are still in. Not in the opener, though, so Adrian will take Ghost Quarter.
It's a little upsetting to not have Leyline in your opener and then see it with your card selection spell.
Yeah, things just didn't work out. And now we'll go over to Daniel's side. Last game, he actually did not keep any discard. His tournament play was just a land. But this time he'll get to see Adrian's hand. Here's Thoughtseize from Fournier. And let's take a look at Adrian's hand. He's got Ensnaring Bridge, Collective Brutality, and 3 lands. It's that Ghost Quarter he picked up, an Inventor's Fair, and a Blooming Marsh.
This hand's going to need some help, and it's currently getting hurt.
Well, and you're just going to see that with his Lantern deck in this matchup with so many discard spells. You know, the deck plays a lot of cards that are not real. Your opponent can leave you with a Lantern of Insight and take your other cards, that kind of thing.
There are several cards in Adrian's main deck for this constructed Modern event that you would not start in your draft deck.
And his draw there not helping him out any. It's a second Mox Opal. He'll cast Collective Brutality. His hand now, no real cards in it. Just lands in another Opal. Let's take a look at Fournier's hand. Maybe what does it have to offer? We see Thought Scour, Ceremonious Rejection, another Thoughtseize, Tasigur, Death Shadow, and another land.
This is another nice hand. It's not as good as the last one.
Yeah, that Thoughtseize is pretty dead here. But we do have Tasigur, we do have Death Shadow. It's got a good clock. It's a little weak to a top-decked Ensnaring Bridge if Adrian takes the rejection. And that's something he can work toward.
Yep, a lot of reason to go for that rejection there. You do have to be a little bit concerned if you leave Daniel with the Thought Scour. He can cast a turn 2 Tasigur, which is my favorite thing to do in Modern, turn 2 Tasigur.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to take the Thought Scour actually to prevent that. But it means he'll have to find a way through the Ceremonious Rejection later. Snapcaster Mage the pickup for Fournier. I suppose with Fournier, can only bring himself down to 13 life, can't cast Tasigur, can't cast Death Shadow.
May as well cast Thoughtseize, right?
Yeah, mostly because it puts him to 11, so it means I guess you could shock Thoughtseize and Death Shadow.
Yeah, that seems like the play here. The Thoughtseize isn't going to get better.
And that's what he's going to do. Shock to 13, Thoughtseize to 11.
The concern is that there's another Collective Brutality immediately on top of Adrian's deck that would kill the Death Shadow, but then he just has Tasigur as backup anyway.
And he takes the second Mox Opal, leaves Adrian with a pair of lands. So Adrian is going to need the top of his deck to help him out here. Now Daniel has to decide, does he want to make Death Shadow or hold up Ceremonious Rejection? And he says go. He's playing defense.
Yeah, it certainly makes enough sense.
I guess if he doesn't, because of the way his deck's configured, if he were to tap out for Shadow and Adrian top decks Ensnaring Bridge, that might just be a loss.
Yeah, you can't beat that one.
Very careful.
You know that he won't be able to have discard spell plus bridge. You saw his hand of lands.
Inventor's Fair from Adrian. That's one of the 2 lands Daniel knew about, so there's a mystery card in Sullivan's hand. Draw from Fournier. He'd love to find a fetch land with one of these draws.
Yes.
But cannot. Instead, it's just Death Shadow as a 2/2. And he'll say go. Slow clock from Fournier. Can Adrian capitalize? Remember that Inventor's Fair ability, the one that lets you search up an artifact, you need to have 3 artifacts in play to activate that. And Glimmer Void from Adrian. No danger of losing the Mox Opal, though.
You also need 3 artifacts to gain the 1 life a turn.
Yeah. And here's a Watery Grave into play from Daniel, so it's a 3rd land. He'll go down to 9. Death Shadow hits for 4. And now another Shadow from Fournier. And this is the scary part about the Grixis deck. It goes from Thoughtseizing you to killing you so quickly.
It's really amusing how good non-basic mana producing or fetch land are as top decks in a lot of these spots.
Another land from Sullivan. It's the Ghost Quarter. And then he's going to be in a tough spot. That Ceremonious Rejection in Fournier's hand really strong. Adrian will need something like Brutality into Bridge.
A pretty tall order.
Swing puts Adrian to 8. It's a 2-turn clock for Daniel. Can Adrian keep his tournament hopes alive here?
Like you're saying, it's got to be discard spell plus bridge, and it's got to be now.
Glimmer Void. He has 2 cards left. Are they the 2 he needs? 4 mana Phyrexian Metamorph. He's paying the blue for it.
Currently, he would have the larger Death Shadow.
Yeah, and you can't say it was rejection of Metamorph. It's a blue spell. Okay. This is
It may look colorless.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, he'll copy Death Shadow. This is great. Adrian's is a 5/5. All right. All right.
It's kind of interesting that Adrian chose to pay mana instead of life. If Daniel draws another shock land, he can have the larger shadows again.
Snapcaster Mage from Fournier.
How about cast Thoughtseize from the graveyard? That's another option as well.
This is an end step Thought Scour off Snapcaster. Mills Liliana and a land. He'll draw. Rise Fall.
I suppose he's too light on lands to be incentivized.
Well, Rise Fall bounces can bounce a creature.
Yeah, that one's good.
That might just be the win here for Fournier. Does he have to have a creature in his graveyard to cast it? I don't believe so.
Turn your head sideways real quick. Let's find out. Yeah, it looks like it has two targets.
Yeah, you have. It's from a graveyard.
Currently, Daniel asking a question away from the table, possibly regarding.
Yeah. If Adrian had a creature in graveyard, Daniel could target it, but Adrian doesn't.
Not a very creature-heavy deck.
No, Metamorph's the only. No Magus of the Moat or Padim.
Right.
Interesting draw here. Yeah, he can't cast the Rise part of Rise Fall.
You know what card he would be able to cast?
Okay.
It costs black-red 1.
Colligan's Command. That'd be nice here. But it looks like he might win the match without it.
I don't think it's going to matter.
Maybe he can always just make a Tasigur. He has a Thoughtseize in hand. He'll just cast that. He's going to Thoughtseize himself. Oh, this is so good.
He's going to put a creature in his graveyard?
Yeah, he is.
Still got that
he
Tasigur.
is.
That's pretty nice.
Nice. I'm way into this. Yeah, Tasigur. Thoughtseize himself. Put Tasigur in the graveyard. Hey, there's something. Return the Metamorph and the Tasigur with the Rise half of Rise Fall. Remove Adrian's blockers. What a fancy finish here for Fournier. Is it going to be good enough? And he extends the hand. That'll do it. Daniel Fournier in 4 wins the match and moves on to the semifinals.
Yeah, congratulations to Daniel Fournier. Condolences. Yeah, congratulations to Adrian Sullivan as well.
And for Adrian Sullivan, a great tournament, a great run with Lantern Control.